This is the VandySports Podcast on the 440 Sports Network. I'm your host, Billy Derrick, alongside Joey Dwyer for our Tuesday pod. Today's show is brought to you by the Wash House, the Murfreesboro Pure Milk Company, Sutherland and Belk, and the Maynard-Nexen Government Contracts Group. Topics on today's show, as well as this season's baseball content, which, as we know, rapidly approaching. We'll touch on a few baseball notes today. But the topics are brought to you by the Murfreesboro Pure Milk Company. They're family-owned. They are a third-generation milk and ice cream distribution company located out in Murfreesboro. That partnership began over 50 years ago with Purity Dairy in Nashville to provide purity milk and ice cream to consumers in Middle Tennessee. And they now serve all over the South, Kentucky, Northern Alabama, Chattanooga, and North Georgia. And today they supply grocery stores, convenience stores, and others with Purity products, as well as Mayfield, Nestle, and Haagen-Dazs ice cream. For more info, visit their website. That's npmci.com, npmci.com, and tell them VandySports.com sent you. Joey, Vanderbilt baseball loses 16-6 in 18 innings at Rutgers this past weekend. Kind of an interesting result. We'll touch a little bit on that. Wake Forest coming up this Saturday. They will travel here to Nashville for a scrimmage on Saturday. Chase Burns coming to face Vanderbilt again, a program that he, of course, is familiar with after pitching at Tennessee. We'll get to some football notes. Joey, Ken Seals is going to start on Saturday against Ole Miss, and I mean, Clark said it yesterday on Commodore Hour that we're going to keep moving forward with Ken. So, I mean, I would assume he is the starter for the near future. Vanderbilt and Auburn kickoff announced for 3:00 Central Time, not this weekend, of course, but next weekend on the SEC Network. And Joey, I think what you're most excited about, we are 2 weeks away from basketball season. Vanderbilt and Presbyterian on a Tuesday night, November the 7th, 7:00 tip-off. So, of course, we'll continue to hype everybody up, get the fans ready for basketball season, even though some of them might still be in football mode. Trying to make that mental switch can be hard, but maybe it's a little bit easier this year. But Joey, today's news is brought to you by the Wash House, our presenting sponsor for basketball season. Are you dreading laundry day? Is it stealing time to do the things that you truly enjoy? Let the laundry professionals at the Wash House take care of that for you. With 2 convenient locations in the greater Nashville area, just drop off your dirty laundry, and their professional attendants can give you back the one thing you can never have enough of, your time. Within 24 hours, you can pick up your nicely folded, fresh, and cleaned laundry, ready to be put away. Log on to their website. That's washhouseclean.com. Again, that's washhouseclean.com. Or stop in today and get your time back. All right, Joey, let's touch on a few of these opening notes here. Of course, we've got a few big themes for another basketball podcast today, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But let's start with baseball. Rutgers, I don't want to say dominated because, number one, it's a fall scrimmage, and you can't take away too much from a fall scrimmage. But it's interesting how they played this. Game 1, Vanderbilt lost 8-4. Game 2, they lost 6-2. And then game 3, they lost 2-0. But they played 6-inning games. And I saw where they played the bottom half of the 6th inning, whereas Joey, if you're the home team, you don't play that bottom half. Rutgers had tacked on, I think, a couple of more runs in those, so the score was probably a little bit tilted. But I mean, that's what these fall scrimmages are about, to get innings in, get pitchers up there and just get work in. It's not really about the result as much as it is just getting guys out there. I did see, though, Joey, RJ Austin reportedly was the standout, and looks like he's got a little bit more power, and we know about his speed. So I think they're finding ways to potentially try to replace Enrique Bradfield. You're not going to replace him with just one guy. There's not another Enrique Bradfield walking through those doors, but I think you can try to replace him with a couple of different guys. Austin's in the mix there, Humphrey, Hewitt, and you've got speed out there, Vastine. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they attack that. But I also saw Joey Ethan McElvain pitched well. So all in all, I mean, it's not an encouraging result, but I don't think it's overly discouraging either.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think really what I had to take away was the lineup, and also that Vanderbilt, I have my questions about their lineup and whether they have enough power, whether they have enough pop in that lineup. Chris Maldonado playing first, I think, was interesting. RJ Austin played right field, I think, maybe left field. So it kind of gives you an idea of his positional versatility. The scrimmage we were at, he played center field and second base. So it feels like he might be kind of a utility guy, and I may ask Corbin about that later. But I think Vanderbilt's lineup not being awesome was something to kind of take away from Saturday. Their pitching really was not awesome, but 16 innings, or 18 innings, 16 runs.
18, yeah.
18 innings, 16 runs. I guess it could be worse. Devin Futrell wasn't awesome. Grayson Carter seemed to be pretty solid, impressing people there. Ethan McElvain gave up the homer, but otherwise was pretty good. I think I'm never really concerned about pitching in October with college baseball. It's so early on the cycle, and a lot of guys aren't even really fully ramped up yet or even close to it. So I don't know that I'm fully concerned about the pitching. The hitting I'm a little more concerned about. I thought it was interesting Calvin Hewitt played instead of Humphrey. I think Humphrey could really give them some things, and I'm interested to see if he'll start on Saturday. Otherwise, not a whole lot to take away. Jack Bolger at cleanup, I'm sure the message board was not super happy with. I think they have better options there. Perhaps Chris Maldonado could be a guy who slides in there, but Billy, it's hard to take away a whole lot, especially when we weren't there. We'll probably have more on Saturday when they play Wake Forest, that's a real opponent. Not that Rutgers wasn't. Rutgers certainly showed Vanderbilt that it is a real opponent, but we'll have a lot more of an idea once we see these games on Saturday.
Yeah, and today we'll actually be able to ask Corbin about a game and about action. Actually ask his thoughts as opposed to, basically previewing the season, not really having a basis of too much. It was just more of an introduction. I thought it was interesting. Devin Futrell feels like the guy right now. I mean, Carter Holton getting back to speed, you would guess, but when Holton gets back to full speed at 100%, you would guess Holton would be the ace there, and then it looks like Futrell would probably be the number 2 guy, and then number 3. Who knows? There's so many guys there, so many options. Leboki, we've seen Leboki pitch as well. RJ Austin, Joe, you mentioned it. He was in right field. What they do in the outfield is going to be interesting. Calvin Hewitt played in center. At least started the day in center. Troy Lenee was in left. There's a lot of mixing and matching that you do in fall, and especially in the infield as well. Vastine and Davis up the middle, feel pretty solid there. What happens at first base, though? Do you stick with Maldonado at first base? So it feels a little too early to even be talking about this, but the fact that Vanderbilt, they had highlights available. I mean, there were plenty of people there, taking clips. So there's stuff all over Twitter, and they posted the lineup. So no stats though. But this weekend, I'm sure we'll be able to keep track of our own stats and Vanderbilt and Wake Forest going at it Saturday. And I want to say 11 a.m. We haven't confirmed that. We saw that somewhere, Joey. We're going to work to confirm that. But if you do want to go, free admission. I think only the outfield is going to be available, though. So we'll try to hammer down that start time on Saturday. Joey, let's go on to football. Clark Lee said on Commodore Hour last night that Ken Seals is going to start on Saturday against Ole Miss. He didn't say that directly, like he didn't say he was going to start against Ole Miss, but he said we're going forward with Ken Seals. Hence, he's starting against Ole Miss. C.J. Taylor is doubtful, so doesn't look like we're going to get to see C.J. Taylor on Saturday. DeRicky Wright has been back at practice, so I would guess, Joey, you'll get to see DeRicky Wright. You'll get to see Kane Patterson. Clark speaks today, so we'll get comments from Clark. 6:30 kickoff down in Oxford on Saturday. Ole Miss is a 25-point favorite. Joey, any surprise there with Ken? I mean, I know I talked about it, and we differed a little bit, but deep down, I don't think anybody is too surprised that they're going to stick with Ken Seals.
No, I'm not super surprised. Frankly, Ken Seals has outperformed A.J. Swann this year, and we can talk all about A.J. Swann's arm talent and all the big playability he has, but Ken Seals has outproduced him this year. Ken Seals has pretty much every stat is better for Ken Seals than A.J. Swann's is, except for yards per game, and Swann has him by 12 yards. Seals doesn't turn it over as much, although there's some balls that have been dropped. Swann had some balls that have been dropped too, and still has way more interceptions than Seals. Seals has thrown less than an interception per game. Those haven't been quite as costly as Swann's have either. They haven't been returned quite the way that Seals or haven't been returned quite the way that Swann's have been. And Swann gives the defense a lot more opportunity to make those kind of plays. Seals feels like their game manager, steady hand, and we talked about this a lot, but I feel like you have to go with him moving forward. He's probably not going to win you a game against say, at Georgia, like maybe Swan would allow you to if he's having maybe a career day. But Steele's going to keep that game respectable, and we saw that against Georgia. Perhaps against an Auburn or a South Carolina, Steele's can kind of lead them into a tougher environment in South Carolina and keep them in the game late and maybe make some plays down the stretch to win a game like that. So I think I'm more confident with Steele's moving forward, but certainly makes you wonder what's ahead for A.J. Swan, a guy who has immense arm talent, like we mentioned all the time, and look to be their future quarterback heading into the year. Steele's has 2 years of eligibility left, though, so if he wins the job moving forward throughout the rest of the season and wins it in the offseason, you have to wonder, what are they doing here? Is Ken Steele's going to keep that job? And I think there's certainly a case for Ken Steele's to continue with that job and continue moving forward with it with those 2 years of eligibility. And it would be really interesting to see if A.J. Swan came back in the spring, how this would all shake out. I think Vanderbilt has to commit to Ken Steele's moving forward, though, and have some conviction in that decision. It can't be, well, we're still evaluating and we're looking at A.J. for this week and we're going to see if he's healthy. Can't be that anymore. You're coming out of the bye. This will be Ken Steele's 4th straight start, assuming he makes it. Got to make some decisions with some conviction here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Joey, it's a good point. I mean, this is a big last 4 weeks of the season, or 4 games of the season at least. You got 5 weeks technically. But it's also a huge last 4 games for that quarterback room to evaluate those 2 guys. I mean, I think you know what you have in Ken Steele's. I don't know that you really know the entire picture with Swan. Swan, we've seen it. We've seen flashes, but we've also seen some brutal mistakes this season that, quite frankly, has cost Vanderbilt a few games, I think. And you just couldn't continue to put him out there. So, I mean, it'll be interesting, Joe. It's a huge, huge last 4 games of this season to decipher as this coaching staff, right? Do you continue to give it to Ken Steele's? Do you give AJ an opportunity? I mean, who knows? We'll see. Ole Miss this Saturday. That's when it'll start. 6:30 kick on the SEC Network. You've got next week, though, 3 o'clock kickoff time for Vanderbilt's homecoming game against Auburn. That is November 4th. So here in a couple of weeks, that'll be on the SEC Network. I think Vanderbilt owns the 3 p.m. SEC Network time slot, Joe. I think they hold the record for those. But they'll have another one, Vandy and Auburn. All right, Joey, let's get into it. Our guest line is Joey Dwyer, and it's brought to you by John Leffen and the Maynard Nexen Government Contracts Group. Maynard Nexen advises government contractors on all aspects of their businesses with a proud focus on matching legal solutions to business needs. Give them a call, 256-551-0171. Again, that's 256-551-0171. All right, today's hoops topic, we got several, actually. Number one, we're going to talk about some breakout guys. I think we've hinted at some guys. We're going to talk about some potential breakout guys. We'll ask the question, can the defense this season be good enough? And we've got some good numbers to back it up there. How do they replace Lee Dort? Jerry Stackhouse at SEC Media Days came out and said that he's about 3 to 4 weeks away. Away from what? I mean, away from getting on the court and practicing, away from being 100%. It's still fairly unclear there on Lee Dort. And then we'll continue to talk about Vanderbilt's length and athleticism heading into this season. And then we'll get to a few mailbag questions. So a lot to get to here, Joey. We'll start, though, with a couple of our breakout candidates. And we've talked about a few of these guys, and we've hinted at them. But let's name one. Let's look at one guys. I know there's several guys that you probably want to hit on. But if you were to pick one guy that by the end of this season, you say, wow, he really broke out and really helped this team, who would that be for you? You go first.
I think the answer for me is fairly obvious. Colin Smith. Colin Smith, basically anyone I talked to this summer within the program or even a step away from the program, if I said, how's summer practice going, how's the summer session, they said, man, you got to see Colin Smith. Colin Smith has done some great work on his body. He's really started to figure some things out off the dribble. He's making plays for others, as Ezra Magnon told me last week. Feels like Colin Smith is really in line to be their breakout guy. Didn't average more than 5 points a game last year, but shot it really well. Had a really nice offensive rating. I think had the highest offensive rating in terms of efficiency on the roster. So all the peripheral numbers are there for Colin Smith. He put work in on his body. You saw towards the end of the year, he kind of expanded his offensive game into being a little more of an offensive dribble guy. Maybe that continues throughout the year. And I think Vanderbilt's going to need him to be a third scorer. Vanderbilt certainly has room for him to step into a bigger role. He's going to start at the 4, I would think. He's probably going to slide down to the 3 a little bit. Maybe play some 5 as well. His rebounding is going to be really valuable for them. His ability to defend a little bit and bring some energy is going to be huge for them as well. Really where I look to Colin Smith to take a breakout, though, is in terms of his off-the-dribble ability and his scoring. Let's say they played a secret scrimmage in Ohio against West Virginia, theoretically. Colin Smith supposedly would have led them in scoring if that game were to have happened. So Colin Smith, I think that tells you something. Colin Smith led them in scoring in the secret scrimmage if you couldn't decipher my secret messaging, because those scrimmages are really secretive. But it feels like Vanderbilt has something here and has a guy who could really take a leap moving forward. And Vanderbilt's going to need a third scorer alongside Ezra Manjon and Tyler Lawrence. Why not Colin Smith?
Why not? Why not? I mean, he's the obvious option there. And I mean, that was going to be my answer, but I'll throw in another guy. I don't want to be boring here, but Paul Lewis. I think Paul Lewis, similar to Smith, right? I mean, right behind Manjon and Lawrence, you're going to need Paul Lewis to step up and hit some shots. And I mean, you could argue last year was his breakout, but that was his freshman year, and you usually don't call breakout seasons. You don't call freshman years, breakout seasons typically, But coming into his sophomore year, I think Lewis can really help this team. You saw him last year, Joey, hit some really big shots in key moments in postseason games. LSU, Kentucky, in the bright lights, at Bridgestone, in the SEC tournament. I thought those were huge. Even in the NIT, I think you saw him shoot it pretty well. Last year, played in 25 games. He started in 5 games, actually. And so, his numbers maybe don't pop off the page to you. But this year, I think Paul Lewis's numbers should pop off the page in a better way for this team if they want to be successful. And for Lewis, I'm not asking him, like if I'm Stackhouse, Joey, I'm not asking Lewis to, he might play some 1, I'm sure. But Manjon, I mean, the amount of minutes Manjon played last year, I don't know that Manjon is going to be taken out of too many games, especially important SEC games. Now, non-conference, of course, you'll see him get some rest. But Paul Lewis simply going in there and saying, hey, be our microwave, right? Be that guy for us that can really heat us up when we need it. Because you look around the roster, I mean, Evan Taylor could potentially be that guy. Maybe Colin Smith. You got plenty of guards that can shoot the ball. That's the thing. Joe, you look at this team, there's a lot of breakout candidates. I mean, potentially Evan Taylor. Lubin, I think in the post, potentially. If Allen Lubin's a breakout candidate, this season's probably going well for Vanderbilt. But I'll say Paul Lewis, Joey. I'm excited to see what he brings. Is he more physical, right? I mean, last year he was really primarily a shooter. I mean, I don't know that he really, was much of a weapon penetrating wise, getting in the paint. But if he can do some of that, man, these guards, Joey, will establish themselves at the top of the SEC, I think, at least in the top echelon. I think they're already there with Manjon and Lawrence. But if you throw Lewis in there and you throw Taylor, even Smith, Rivera Torres, so I mean, you start to establish a pretty good presence there in the backcourt. So I will go Paul Lewis. Joey, I know you got a few other candidates. Who else do you think could break out?
Yeah, I have a few others in mind. I want to touch on Paul Lewis more, though. I think you could really see him step into more of an off-the-dribble scoring role. You saw the composure last year. I think there was a stat that I dug up. I think he had 5 turnovers midway through January or midway through February. For a freshman point guard, that is really impressive. The composure was there.
Yeah.
You saw him guard pretty well. He kind of took control of the offense when Ezra wasn't on the floor. So there's a lot to like with Paul Lewis, but I think you want to see the next step in terms of him being a scorer and him getting his own shot, going up stronger around the rim. I think that's something that maybe can be improved. And Ezra Manjon raved about Paul Lewis, and normally Ezra raves about everybody. Ezra knows how to talk to the media, but I think talking to him about Paul Lewis felt a little bit different this time. He said this is a completely different Paul Lewis, and it was a good Paul Lewis in the spring, but this guy's taking a step forward. Even Stack said he's kind of battling with Ezra more than he did last year. He said Ezra was kind of the guy in practice last year Paul Lewis deferred to, but this year it feels like Paul Lewis is really giving him a run for his money day by day. So it feels like the player development there is really taking a step forward, and I think you could see that turn into tangible results this year. Mentioned Magnon a little bit. I think that's a guy who can maybe take a leap as well. Didn't have a whole lot of consistency last year, especially through, I guess, mid-January. Probably didn't have a lot of consistency, but really started to get going at the end of the year, started hitting shots, and talked a little bit to him about, I guess, his three-point shooting, and feels like that's an area where he could really take a step. Says that's been his point of emphasis throughout the offseason, is just kind of being able to spread out defenses and make shots from the perimeter. And I think if Ezra Magnon can do that and shoot it, even 32, 33% rather than 25, that looks like a completely different player to me. And if he can have that confidence that he had in the second half and take that from day one and attack, that's a completely different player than you saw early in the year last year. And that's a player that helps Vanderbilt hit the ground running early and be a real threat to make some noise early in the year. Ezra Magnon has the keys to this car and feels like he's finally embracing that more than he did at the beginning of last season. Lubin's the other one I wanted to mention as well. Billy, he's only a sophomore. I think people forget that because he's a transfer. He could take a leap as well. I think averaged, 7 points a game last year at Notre Dame, played a lot of minutes. I think his minutes could go up this year. He's going to have a lot of opportunity, probably more opportunity than he thought he was going to have coming into this thing. But it feels like he's a guy who could really take another step forward as well, especially with how much he's going to have to be relied upon. You would hope that Lee Dort would be able to take some weight off his shoulders, but Lubin's going to have to do some things for them as well. So you really look to that sophomore class as the class that could take leaps. As a Paul Lewis really becoming their sixth man and their microwave scorer off the bench that can also facilitate and do some good things off the ball and even on the ball. And Ezra Magnon has to come out of the game. Is it Colin Smith becoming a go-to scorer? Is it Lubin really becoming a force down there and becoming a true SEC 5? I think there's a lot of things up in the air here, but a lot of encouraging signs throughout the offseason and a lot of good word coming out of the program regarding that sophomore class.
There's probably some ears perking up when you talk about Magnon's shooting. I mean, if Ezra Magnon can start to consistently hit some threes this season, I mean, the sky's the limit for this team, right? I think we talked off air a couple of days ago, 30, 35%. I mean, that would be unbelievable for this team, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think for Magnon's shooting itself could be a breakout. I mean, we know Magnon. I think we know enough about him that I don't think we'd really be totally surprised by much of anything in terms of his defense or pick and roll skills, getting inside the paint. But if he can find a 3-point game, look out, because this team could be scary in that backcourt. We keep saying that, Joey, right? That if this happens, if they can do this, watch out, right? It's it's like a teeter-totter team, right? But it can be really good this year, but they could also struggle. Like there's a lot of if or then statements, right? I mean, if this happens, then look out. Vanderbilt is going to be a challenge to face in the SEC. So there's a lot of questions to be answered. I'm not saying this team has everything they need because they don't, and we're going to get to that right now with Lee Dort. And I want to get to Lee Dort.
I want to talk more about Dort. I think Ezra's shooting, I think, will be noticeably different, not only in terms of him making more shots, but I think the confidence level in which he's taking them. I asked him about the volume, and he said, I don't know if the volume is necessarily going to go up, but I'm going to take them more, and I'm going to be a little more confident taking them because of all the work I put in this offseason. I think that's something that's really worth noting. Tyron Lawrence also wants to improve his efficiency from beyond the arc. I think he, early in the year, was more of a slasher and started to get that shot going later in the year as basketball season went on. But Tyron Lawrence is also a guy who I think could take another step. If you can get Tyron Lawrence from 13.8 points to 15 or 16, that's a significant leap. If Ezra Magnon can go from 10.8 to 12, 13, that's a significant leap. those two guys in the backcourt also have to take leaps. And I think that's something that we haven't been super cognizant of over the offseason, but you're going to have leaps from your veteran backcourt guys. And I think with the opportunity they're going to have, they're certainly capable of doing it. But just wanted to note that I think Ezra has taken a bit of a mechanical change, not a whole lot. I think it's more so just reps, but did mention something with mechanics, nothing specific, but just wanted to note that and provide some of what I heard last week. But shooting's an emphasis point for both of them, which I don't know if you love to hear that both guys feel like they need to improve their shooting heading into their last year when they consider themselves the best backcourt in the country. But I do think there's room for them to step up there, and there's a lot of speed in that backcourt, and pair that with better shot making. I think you have something really special. Billy, sorry to interrupt, but I had some thoughts.
No worries. Joey, last season, Tyler Lawrence shot 36% from three. Ezra Manjon shot 25% from three. So, I mean, and Tyler doesn't – that percentage doesn't really have to go up too much. If it does, good for Vanderbilt. For Ezra Manjon, that's the key number. If he can get his up to at least 30%, dangerous. I mean, you just – because those are 3-point makes. Right, they're not 2-point makes, right? That's another point that you're getting every time he makes it. So, of course, that's something to watch as well. All right, Joey, let's get to the Lee Dort news, and I saved that defense question because we've got a lot of defensive numbers coming up here in a second. So let's get to Lee Dort and the significance of the news we heard. And the question I pose here, Joey, what you posed, is how do they replace Lee Dort? And it's interesting, at SEC Media Days, you were there. I think you got this quote out of Stackhouse. I think you got quotes out of everybody. The important ones that Vanderbilt fans care about. But Stackhouse, I thought it was interesting, said he's probably 3 or 4 weeks away. We're hoping that he's ready to go by opening day. We're not going to force it. I think it's more important for us to be smart, not have any setbacks. Really, if we could have him at full throttle by SEC play, I think that would be more of a realistic goal. If he's ahead of schedule, able to participate in some of the early season games, non-conference games, then so be it. So 3 to 4 weeks, Joey. Now, what that means, that could mean nothing, right? I think just hearing a number, though, it is nice probably for Vanderbilt fans to hear. You have some sort of a timetable there. I thought it was interesting, though, towards the end of Stackhouse's comments about Dort's injury. He said, I think we have the depth and the ability to play some versatile styles that we can do without him for right now. But he's definitely a big body that we need just from a rim protection standpoint, just his overall presence. He's a good player, and I know he's anxious to show that. And, Joey, we've talked about this, and I mentioned this in one of my takeaways in my piece after Media Days. It's been tough for Lee Dort to get work in this offseason. I mean, it's been a tough offseason. And for him, Joey, they're going to struggle without Dort in the post. Now, they've got Van Allen Lubin, of course, transfer from Notre Dame. They've got Tassos Kamateros, transfer from South Dakota. But, I mean, Joey, other than that, you're looking at some freshmen. You're looking at Carter Lang, potentially J.Q. Roberts, maybe playing smaller with Colin Smith. And Stackhouse knows it. I felt in that. Watching the video, they know they're thin there. I mean, it's pretty obvious to see that. So for Lee Dort to get back sooner rather than later will be big. But if he's not able to get back until SEC play, you still got that adjustment period of a couple of weeks. I mean, and then you got to jump into SEC play. I think the earlier they get him back, Joey, the better, because that front court, they need some time with him on the floor to readjust and get used to, kind of that SEC speed we talk about.
Totally. Here's the thing with Lee Dort. They're going to have to rely on Lee Dort more than I think they would like to have to rely on Lee Dort. And that's kind of a testament to how this roster is built. It's built towards more of a small ball approach, and Lee Dort is their most physically imposing big man. He's their best shot blocker. I don't think he's their best poster. I think that's Van Allen Lubin, but there's a lot to like with Lee Dort. You haven't seen it in prolonged stretches yet, though, and I think that's something that Vanderbilt is really not super excited about. I think they would love to have Lee Dort throughout a lot of SEC play and have him be a complementary piece that can eat some minutes, and I think that's really my hope with Lee Dort for them at this point, is that he can eat some minutes. Let's say best case scenario, Van Allen Lubin takes a leap, he stays out of foul trouble, plays 25 minutes a game, he's a beast, right? Van Allen Lubin's probably not going to play more than that 25 minutes a whole lot. It's just hard for bigs by nature in the SEC to do that, especially when you're only 6'8", playing the 5 as a young guy. So you'd hope you can get 25 out of Van Allen Lubin. Without Lee Dort, and I guess you might have Lee Dort from opening night. What I generally think of when Stack says 3 to 4 weeks is that's when he'll be live. That's when he'll be practicing going 5-on-5. That doesn't mean he's necessarily in game shape or shape to play more than a few minutes or in shape to bang bodies or whatever down low. So I would guess that Lee Dort's not able to eat a whole lot of minutes early, and that's a little scary for me. Where I think those minutes go, I guess you turn to Tassos Comateros at the 5, who's undersized. I don't know if he can guard the 5, but gives you an element of floor spacing there. I think he can do some nice things for you and kind of give you a different look offensively than Lubin does. Maybe that's valuable early in the year against some of those smaller teams. Colin Smith also could give you a different look there. I think Colin Smith could be a guy who could play small ball 5, especially at other schools. I think that would be more of a thought than it is at Vanderbilt. They've kind of wanted him to play the 3, it's felt like, more than I guess I have. But Smith, I think, is a guy who could be a little suitable at the 5. I don't think that's his best utilization. I think he has some more ability elsewhere, but he has the physicality to at least kind of hold his own. He can rebound it. I like that more than Roberts just because Smith can shoot it better. And if you're going to commit to a small ball lineup, you have to have a guy who can spread the floor and open up driving lanes and such. And I think Vanderbilt can do that with Smith at the 5. So I don't hate that. I also don't think that they're in an ideal spot defensively with Smith or Comateros. What I want to ask Stack about is how much he thinks they can hedge. Because I think if they can hedge with Smith and they can hedge with Comateros, then they can really do some good things. Lang's also a guy we're bringing up. Yeah. I think generally what you would want with that, I guess, more athletic, versatile lineup.
Because, Joey, look back. You talk about hedging. Think about teams like in Alabama. You remember how much they hedged with their athletic 4 and 5 men? Like that is – I mean, they hedged against Vanderbilt, right? LSU, I think, is a team that hedged with who was their 4 guy that destroyed Vanderbilt last year?
KJ Williams.
Yeah, with KJ. I mean, Vanderbilt doesn't have a KJ Williams. They don't have – I mean, Alabama, they – like the 4-man and the 5-men this year in the SEC, you know it, Joey. You've seen it. They're athletic freaks. So, and they can hedge with all of them. That's a good point. If Vanderbilt can hedge on those screens, that alleviates a little bit of this. Not all of it, but if they can't, all of a sudden, like you said, scary proposition.
Yeah, I think they really would love to have a longer, more athletic, versatile defense, and I think we'll get to that later, but Lubin, I think, provides that a little bit. He can get out and hedge and make some plays on the perimeter. Also, you look at Colin Smith doing that at maybe the 4 or the 5. That helps you a lot. Maybe Vanderbilt can force some more turnovers by being aggressive and attacking ball handlers, and I think that's maybe the advantage to not having Lee Dort. He's going to have to play a lot of drop coverage. And he hedged a little bit last year at the end of the year, but ideally you'd want him to be a dropper. So Vanderbilt's going to be more aggressive without Lee Dort, and they're probably going to do some things they wouldn't do with him on the floor, but obviously you need his rebounding, you need his shot blocking, you need him to eat some minutes as a true 5 against some of the 5s in the league. Although there aren't, I guess, the same level of 5s that there have been, Vanderbilt's going to struggle with a lot of these guys, though. Aaron Bradshaw comes to mind, Tolu Smith, guys we've brought up before, but it's going to be difficult. Carter Lang, I'm not sure, is fully ready. He's probably going to have to eat some minutes. Comateros has his flaws, especially at the 5. He'll probably have to eat some minutes there, and then they'll have to go small at times with Colin Smith or J.Q. Roberts at the 5. And I don't know if I love either of those options. I'm sure they don't either. So it'll be interesting, Billy, but I think the theme of athleticism and versatility kind of comes to mind there again.
Yeah, and the theme of physicality, right? The SEC is a physical league, Joey. They're arguably the best league coming into this season. I think in the opening AP top 25 poll, they had 5 in the top 25, most out of any league. So this is an even better. It keeps getting better. It's crazy how much better the SEC has been getting over the years. So it's physical and right. And at times last year, Joey, I thought Vanderbilt. I thought they were, and not super often. I thought they were a a fairly physical team last year, right? I don't think they really got bullied too much. Even at home against Tennessee, a lot of the talk going into that one was that Tennessee's a physical team. Vanderbilt might keep it close, but late in the game, Tennessee will pull away. Vanderbilt hung tough, right? I think in the SEC tournament, LSU, known to be a pretty physical team, handled them, handled Kentucky, who we know they're probably maybe more finesse, but I just think if Vanderbilt in the paint can find ways to be physical, whether it's I'm not saying rough and tough, right? I'm not saying playing dirty, but there's a little bit of that to in the SEC. There's a little bit of that edge that you need to have in the SEC, especially at the 4 and the 5 spot. So you talk about length and athleticism. As much as they need that, Joey, I think a lot of it, especially in the SEC, is just pure physicality. Now, not making tackles out there, right? But being able to hold up, in the second half. It's like football. Can you hold up in the fourth quarter? Physicality wise. So, of course, Lee Dort, Joey, we'll see. We'll see. I'm excited, just like you, to talk to Stack for the first time, which I think would it be next week, or not until game week.
We'll see.
I thought you would know, Mr. Dwyer, but no, it'll be interesting to talk to Stack about a lot of these different things, right? Maybe get an update on Dort, get an update on some other things about Magnon and Lawrence's shooting. So we're also waiting to get word from Stackhouse as well. All right. Question here, Joey, for you: can the defense this year be good enough? And I think we've got math equation answers in terms of numbers here, but I want to mention a few things here, Joey. Last year, opponents averaged 71.5 points per game. That's not great. It's not rock bottom. It's not awful, but it's not great. For reference,
especially
Tennessee,
with the pace they played at.
Exactly. For reference, Joey, Tennessee, who is considered a great defense. Under Rick Barnes, their numbers have been unreal. They gave up just 58 points per game, right? Vanderbilt's given up almost 72 last year. And also they gave up 80 plus points, more than 80 points in 8 games last year. I think that's too high, especially playing in the SEC. Now, a lot of those were in the non-conference, but that's something to watch for, right? Vanderbilt keeping teams in the 60s and 70s is going to be important. Their adjusted defensive efficiency last season was 97, according to Ken Pomeroy. That was 114th in the country out of all 360 Division I programs. Again, not great, right? You'd like to break 100 at least there, especially in the SEC. It's filled with great defenses. You've got to have a great defense, especially if you want to make the SEC tournament. Maybe not great, but you've got to have a better defense than Vanderbilt showed last year at times. But, Joey, what I want to hint at is the takeaways, right? Vanderbilt just didn't really cause turnovers last year. They averaged 5 steals per game, second to last in the SEC. They were in front of only South Carolina. That has to be higher. They only forced 368 turnovers throughout the season. That's, again, second to last in the SEC, in front of only Florida. They're last in the conference with only 10.8 turnovers forced per game. So that's got to change, Joe. You'd like to be in that upper half of the league in, active hands, creating takeaways, or I guess they're called turnovers in basketball. I'm so used to football. Creating those turnovers and getting points off of them, right? I can see this team being pretty active defensively with Magnon, Lawrence. How does Lewis step up defensively? Colin Smith, Lubin as a potential rim protector. But in that backcourt, right, getting steals and getting out and running, right? And I look at that as something that this team could pride themselves on, right? Having that defense kick off the momentum for your team, right? Anytime defense is starting momentum and starting runs, especially in basketball, Joey, as you well know, that's usually a good sign. Think about FAU last year, specifically in that Tennessee game, and as they kept going on that run, they were really a defensive first team. They would trap, they would they would throw different defenses on you, and they would use their defense for momentum and for points. I don't think Vanderbilt has to rely on that, but I think they need that. I think they're going to be a team because of their lack of post presence. They're not going to be able to throw it in the post and say, hey, Van Allen Lubin, go get me a bucket, or Lee Dort, go get us a bucket, right? To replace that, I think turnovers turning into points, specifically in that backcourt, Joey, I think they'll be able to trap at times with guys like Mannion and Lawrence. And those are athletes, man. Like those are guys that Stackhouse really likes to use, I think, in that way. Paul Lewis, maybe even Rivera Torres, Joey. I look at Rivera Torres as potentially a down the stretch of this season. It's weird saying defensive specialist, but say you need a trap, you're down 6, a minute left. Rivera Torres 6'5", right, Joey? I mean 6'4", 6'5".
Taller than that. I think
6'6",
6'7".
Well, I mean that's a long kid out there. He's athletic. I think that so they've got some defensive options. You mentioned the length and athleticism. We're going to recognize that pretty quick with this team. So defensively, you got to get turnovers, Joe. I mean, can they be better? Yeah, they can be better, but can they be good enough? Right? Is better than last year enough? Because they were not very good last year. So just being better than last year for this team, I don't know that that's enough. I think they have to be significantly better defensively, Joey, if they want to make the NCAA tournament. Now, there's a lot of luck involved in a lot of these games, especially late. And you could say shot making is more important. But, Joey, end of the day, defensive efficiency is still pretty important. And there's some guys that need to step up and play better than they did on the defensive end last year.
I'm really glad you brought up turnovers because I think that's probably the area where I think they take the biggest leap defensively. Stackhouse has always wanted to kind of put pressure on opposing ball handlers. He's always wanted to be more aggressive defensively than he has been. I just don't think he's ever had the personnel to do it. There's a lot of guys who weren't long enough, weren't athletic enough for their positions. I feel like now, even if his group doesn't grade out super well defensively right now, I think he has more of the horses to be able to play the styles that he wants. It feels like he has athleticism really all over the board. Yeah, so you look at the guards, Tyron Lawrence, Ezra Mannion, 2 really athletic guys who are fast and can get out and pressure. Lawrence has a lot of length. You look at the small forward, Evan Taylor. He was their best guy defensively last year in terms of how they graded out points per 100 possessions, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But I think Vanderbilt also has the bigs to do that as well with Van Allen Lubin kind of getting out and being able to hedge off ball screens, maybe being a little switchable as well. Colin Smith can be switchable at the 4. There's a lot of length and athleticism here, and I think Vanderbilt could maybe attack a little bit more than it has in the past. Certainly has more of the personnel to be able to do it. The microcosm of that for me is Malik Presley and J.Q. Roberts. They're 2 freshman wings besides Jason Rivera-Torres. Those are the 2 most athletic and long guys on the roster who I think have perhaps the highest defensive capability. Those guys aren't even really playing yet. So those guys are both 2 that I look at and just say, man, Stackhouse has a lot more in terms of at least switchability and versatility than he has in the past. And I think you could see that reflected in the turnovers. Maybe not them being a top 5 turnover team in the league, but also not being last in the league like they were last year. I think that was a great stat you brought up. Right now they're 114th in KenPom defensive efficiency, and maybe the turnovers could boost that a little bit. I think part of the reason they're so low is because they struggle to force really any turnovers. Billy, hand it back to me in a second for the grades, but what do you think?
Oh, you back, Joey?
Yeah, have you got me?
Yeah, I got you.
Go ahead.
Okay, I missed your question.
I just said, what do you think about the defense as a whole?
Oh, yeah, as a whole, I mean, Joey, I don't think they were as bad. We say all the time numbers don't lie, but I think the numbers, I mean, they were true, let's face it. But I still don't think they were as bad of a defense as it looks and as the numbers might show. Because you look at a lot of the non-conference games, Temple, they gave up 87 points to Temple. And then all of a sudden you get into SEC play. Vanderbilt was giving up some points, right? I mean, 85 in a loss at Missouri, 84 against Arkansas. That was a win. 82 at Georgia, 101 at Alabama. That 101 I mean, you take that out, it's probably, a few point difference there in the final point total for Vanderbilt. So that probably hurt the efficiency as well. But down the stretch in their winning streak, Joey, the defense improved. I mean, in those home games, especially, this was a defense that I thought was creating turnovers and was active, just not consistently enough, right? I mean, you've got to. I mean, look at Tennessee. Look at some of those really good defenses. Alabama was a great defense last year. I mean, the teams like that are athletic enough to do the things they do defensively, it shows. I mean, it shows in their record, it shows in their stats, and it shows in their consistency in getting to the NCAA tournament, right? So it's got to be better, Joey. As a whole, I mean, I just look at their ability to potentially create turnovers and a high volume of turnovers in the backcourt. I think that's going to be really important. And again, I like Rivera Torres, maybe not offensively yet as a huge weapon, but defensively, I think that's where a guy that you can look at as a guy that, there's a turnover forced by Rivera Torres, right? And all of a sudden Vanderbilt has momentum. So yeah, it'll be interesting, Joey. This defense is huge. I mean, how they improve from last season is going to be huge. So, yeah, it's going to be huge. Joe, lastly here, and we've talked about Vandy's length. Yeah, go ahead.
I got some numbers for you, Billy. I came with my math today. So, Vanderbilt's Chris actually got me these, so shout out to Chris. Chris graded out every player in the SEC defensively per 100 possessions, how many points they gave up. You look at Texas A&M, most of their guys sat around 100 points per game. Tennessee had, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the 80s. South Carolina had guys around 110 hovering generally, so that kind of gives you an idea as to where the rest of the league was, the top of the league versus the bottom. Here's where Vanderbilt was. Ezra Wanyode, 110 points per 100 possessions. Tyron Lawrence, 107 points per 100 possessions. Evan Taylor in the Patriot League, 100 points per 100 possessions. Tassos Kamateros in the Summit League, 111 points per 100 possessions. Colin Smith, 112. Van Allen Lubin in the ACC, 108. Paul Lewis, 109. Lee Dort, 103. Billy, not good. And I think those numbers don't fully tell the story. I think Ezra Wanyode and Tyron Lawrence had to face some really good players. And obviously those numbers are a little inflated by pace. I think Vanderbilt kind of had a middling pace, a lot of half-court offense. They weren't running up and down, so those numbers don't look awful. But they also didn't slow the game down, so they weren't really affected that way. But obviously not good. I wanted to touch on the turnover thing a little bit too. Obviously they have length and athleticism that we brought up. Here's where I want to be a negative Nancy. Mississippi State had all that last year and didn't excel in SEC play on the defensive end a whole lot. They were really good, and Ken Palm and such. But when it really mattered, teams that are really good don't turn the ball over no matter what kind of pressure's on them. You saw it with Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt didn't turn the ball over a whole lot against long and athletic teams towards the end of the year. So you can only rely on that so much. You have to be able to guard in space, and you have to be jointed at the hip defensively, and I think that's where Vanderbilt concerns me a little bit. You have the athletes, you have the length. However, that only gets you so far. Great teams like Kentucky, I guess maybe they'll be a little more susceptible to turnovers this year because they're freshmen. Tennessee's not going to turn it over a whole lot. Auburn, probably not going to turn it over a whole lot. I guess Wendell Green might a little bit. But my point is, you can't out-athlete SEC teams if you're Vanderbilt. You have to be able to play to a scheme and play to an identity defensively. And that can't just be pressing and forcing teams to throw the ball all over the yard like you had in the past or like some mid-majors can get away with. These guards are too good in this league. And that's kind of my point here. Wade Taylor's not going to turn it over 10 times just because you put ball pressure on them and have athletes. They're going to be able to navigate that. And Vanderbilt has to have something it can fall back on. Those numbers to me don't quite indicate that you can do that. Their only guy who was close to 100 points per game was Evan Taylor, and he played in the Patriot League and was longer and more athletic than everybody. Lee Dort, also a really small sample size there. So Billy, I'm a little concerned.
Yeah, and you should be. I mean, that's a big proving ground, big proving opportunity for this team this year. They've got to be better defensively. They just have to. Joey, you ready for the mailbag?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's get into the mailbag. Brought to you by Sutherland and Belk, longest running sponsor of VandySports.com. So if you or a loved one has been hurt or in an accident, give them a call. That's Taylor or Russell, 615-846-6200. Again, that's 615-846-6200 to see what your rights are and if they can help. All right, Joe, we got a few to get to here. First, from Mr. Vandy. What do you guys think of the potential of Isaiah West? Joey, go ahead.
First of all, Billy, you might be the best ad reader on YouTube. I love it. Never a mispronunciation, never a stutter. Best in the league. I love it. Isaiah West, I don't know that he's a guy with a Tyron Lawrence-like ceiling. I think he could be a really good player for them eventually, though. I think he defends really well. He has kind of that blue-collar toughness to him, and I think Stackhouse really appreciates that. What I was really struck by this year when I went to see him play at Goodpasture was his passing ability. He's not going to blow you away as an off-the-dribble scoring threat. I think this year he'll probably look like maybe a little bit of a dumbed-down version of Paul Lewis offensively. But I think he can do some good things. By the time he's an old guy, he'll be able to play to some strengths, and hopefully by that point, for his sake, he'll be able to be kind of the starting point guard and will be able to get in the lane and make some plays. I think his passing ability is really valuable as well as his defense. How much the offense can come along will really determine how much of that ceiling he gets to. I don't know that he's an NBA type guy, but I think he could be a good college player if he sticks around for 4 years and does some good things for him.
Yeah, I think he is a perfect program builder type of guy, right? That we might look at, and we probably will. I mean, he's a Nashville kid, played at Goodpasture, had a long, successful career there, and he's a smart kid, right? He's a kid that likely values that Vanderbilt education, and he likely wants to stay home. I don't know that he'll make any real impact this year. And maybe not a ton next year, but year 3, year 4, Joey, I think is when you really can see an impact from Isaiah West. And year 2, I think, yeah, he'll be in the rotation. Now we don't know who will be here. We don't know who will have left. And Stackhouse, I mean, let's face it, the retention of high school recruits has not been great. But I think Isaiah West potentially could be a kid that does stick within the program and enjoys it. I mean, he's in his home city. He had offers from Ole Miss, Wake Forest. I think he was getting looks from Georgia and Memphis, I think, was in there as well. So he's a talented kid, but yeah, he'll need to be developed. But the good thing is he's got Magnon, Lawrence, Lewis in front of him to guide and mold him through that. And he's got Jerry Stackhouse as his coach to build him into a better player. So, yeah, nothing. I mean, no real impact this year, I don't think.
I think he'll play though. I think he'll be a factor at points, kind of like Lewis was last year, but maybe not to that same effect. But yeah, I don't think he'll be like the backcourt guy this year, like you mentioned. He's got guys in front of him. It's hard for me to know exactly what his ceiling is though, because I never saw him fully healthy. I think I saw him close to it, but you never know where the explosiveness is and such. And I don't think you do either, just because we haven't seen him healthy in years fully. So it'll be exciting for him to be 100% for once.
Yeah, he's a combo guard, right? He can play the 1, he can play the 2. And I think Stackhouse likes that about him. They'll be able to kind of mix and match with him with those other guards. So, yeah, excited. But, it'll take some time, I think, with West. All right, let's get to the next one here. All right, Buff Door. What must Vanderbilt do in the non-conference to be positioned to make the NCAA tournament? Joey, we've hinted at this. I think, what did you say, 10-3?
Something like that, yeah, 10-3,
yeah,
11
10-3. Yeah, and I think we agreed. I mean, to make a long answer short, do better than last year. I mean, you just can't. Yeah, I mean, well, we say that, Joey. Greensboro, I think, finished 117 in the net last year. That won't be a cupcake. Now, the first three of the first four will be Presbyterian, Upstate, and Central Arkansas. I mean, if they're
Don't
losing
sleep on the A-Sun, Billy.
But in all honesty, Joey,
Yeah, correct.
It's never easy in college basketball. But you look at some of their non-conference games. NC State in Vegas, that's a big one. BYU, Arizona State, whoever they play there, that's going to be a big one. Boston College at home. I keep staring that one down on this schedule I've got here, and say that's going to be a big one, right? That could be a huge swing opportunity. San Francisco. I mean, San Francisco is always kind of a feisty team. Texas Tech, kind of a down year, right? They're coming off a down year last year. We've talked about it. Memphis, in Memphis on a Saturday. So some golden opportunities, Joey, in terms of what they have to do. I mean, we said it, right? 9 to 10 wins, preferably 10. And if you can get to 11, you're sitting golden.
Yeah, I think they have to get the net up and they have to get double-digit wins. That's kind of my path here. I think 10 puts them in a spot to where they're going to have to maybe go a little over 500 in SEC play. They probably got to get to 20 wins if that's the case. If they can get to 11 wins, that puts them at 3 or 4 wins against teams that are probably in the top 100 of the net. So that helps their rankings out a little bit. And you maybe don't have to get to 20 wins if that's the case. So I'm really interested to see here kind of how this plays out. But, Billy, I think we're kind of in the same realm of 9, 10, 11 wins. I think 9 hurts them a little bit. 10 is kind of par. 11, I think you're in really good shape.
Yeah, Joey, you mentioned the net. I mean, that's the key criteria here. The net includes more components than just winning percentage, right? It takes into account strength of schedule, location of the game, scoring margin, net offensive and defensive efficiency, right? Those types of numbers. I mean, it's different than RPI, and the quality of your wins and losses, that is similar. So there are components of the net that are similar to the RPI, but those offensive and defensive efficiency numbers and scoring margin are going to be huge to watch this season. I mean, Stackhouse at SEC Media Days, Joey, you asked him about it. He made it pretty clear that they have shifted their approach to the non-conference games, and he said they've been forced to do it a little bit.
Do what the Romans do, Billy.
There's parity now. Do what the Romans do.
Beat the hell out of everybody.
If you're up with a 20-point lead, you can't put your guys in at the end of the bench. You have to try to maintain that 20-point lead. That's the reality of how it's weighed with the different rankings and things like that. We're going to finish games. That's what Stackhouse said. And he also said they're going to beat the hell out of everybody. So, I mean, you're going to see, like those first 4 games, Joe, you could see some blowouts from Vanderbilt. I wouldn't be surprised if they hit close to 100 burger. And good on them. I mean, do as the Romans do. Stackhouse said it. They have to do that. So kind of a second part of that question is a bad loss more damaging to the resume than a good win is beneficial? Yeah, I mean, last year showed you that, I think. I mean, they had plenty of good wins. They beat Tennessee, they beat Mississippi State, they beat Auburn. But they look at the whole season. I mean, it's not about your last 15 games. This is about the entire body of work. So, I mean, Joe, the bad loss, you saw it, Grambling and Southern Miss. I mean, those were the killers last year. So, yeah, I mean, I would say yes to answer that. But they've changed their approach, Joey, and according to Stackhouse, they're going to beat the hell out of these non-conference teams.
Yeah, they can't lose a bad game again, especially with – I think they'll have less margin for error this year than maybe they have even in years past, and that's what Clarkley is. But with their schedule, they're not going to have as many opportunities to get big wins. Thus, you have to win when you're supposed to win. You can't have the net killed early because it's gonna be difficult for them, frankly, to boost their net from 79. So any chance you can get to inch away at that is huge. And if you fall 10 spots in December, that's not good. And that's something that Vanderbilt's really going to struggle to bounce back from. It's a lot easier to go down than up in the net, and it feels like that to me.
All right, Joey, last one before we wrap it up here. From SR Kane, what have you heard from embedded moles? I love that term there. how the team is coming together. Again, we're not there. We have not been able to get into practice. Of course, we'll talk to Stack sometime in the next couple of weeks here. We'll have a lot more. I've heard Tyler Lawrence and Ezra Mannion are back and that they've got good chemistry, especially according to you and their quotes at SEC Media Days, Joey. But no, all joking aside, embedded moles, I don't really have any inside information. Mr. Joey Dwyer would have your inside information.
I think they feel pretty good about what they have. It always varies depending on the person. You hear some people saying that they're not awesome and that they don't love what they have, but you hear from Stack and he says he loves what he has. So it's interesting to me. There's a lot of variance in opinion on this team, and that's kind of how I think of this team as a team with a lot of variance. I don't know that it's easy to tell at this point. I mean, West Virginia, they played, but West Virginia didn't have Raekwon Battle, and I don't know how good they're going to be without Raekwon Battle now that he didn't get his waiver. Jesse Edwards felt like he did some things that Vanderbilt wouldn't have liked for him to do on Saturday. So I think there's a lot of questions here still. I think the backcourt's the given, like you said, but there's a lot up in the air. I think they like Van Allen Lubin a lot. They like Rivera Torres a lot. But, man, there's a lot to be solved here, and I think more of what I get from fall practices and summer practices is just how the rotation's shaping out, who looks to have been better. It's really hard to tell if they're going to be a great team based on them playing against themselves for 2 months. So that's kind of where I sit at. I think there's a lot of variance in opinion. Some people think they're going to be awesome. Some people think they're going to be bottom of the league again. So we'll see, Billy. There's not a overflowing confidence coming out of there like there was with the football program this year, but it doesn't always have to be that way. I mean, you can still win games and get better throughout the course of a season. And also there's a lot of people who believe as well, so I wouldn't write them off. I also wouldn't say they're going to go to the Sweet 16 if they played this weekend and everybody was at their current state, though. So we'll see, Billy. I'm not 100% sure. The embedded moles are doing a great job. I love it. But it's hard to take away stuff at this point. Even if we were at practice every day, I'm at Lipscomb practice more than I care to admit. And I still don't know really what they're going to be. I voted on the preseason poll, and I'm not super confident in that pick anyway.
That's the thing. In today's day and age of college basketball, you do not know. You just don't. I mean, who would have thought a team like FAU coming into last season would be a Final Four team? All right, there's so much movement in the portal, even more so in college basketball than college football, because it's a brand new roster for most of these teams every year. And that's the case for Vanderbilt this year. I mean, you could say it. I mean, this is a brand new team. And we talked about the losses last year, Joey. You lost Liam Robbins. You lost Jordan Wright. You lost Stute, Trey Thomas, all those guys. It's a brand new team. I mean, now it's the same backcourt essentially, but brand new front court and a lot of newcomers to this team. So it's going to be fun to watch. We got 2 weeks until Vanderbilt and Presbyterian Tuesday, November the 7th. That is a 7:00 tip-off. So we will be there, and then they play that next Friday against USC Upstate. So we'll see how Vanderbilt starts the season. But Joey, we've got baseball stuff. We got to head over to Tim Corbin's availability. Clark Lee is talking to the media today ahead of Ole Miss on Saturday. Baseball will be training throughout the week. And again, Wake Forest scrimmage on Saturday. Hopefully it's good weather. We will be there. And then we'll probably get creative with some of our content for Ole Miss that night. So stay tuned for that. We will not be going down to Oxford. Unfortunately, it'd be a fun trip, but not able to make it happen. We'll probably get down to Oxford eventually. But for Joey Dwyer, I'm Billy Derrick, and some last words on this podcast. I always forget to close, Joey. This podcast has always been free, and we plan for it to be free. So here's how you can help keep it that way. Give the podcast a review and a 5-star rating. That helps us get noticed. If you're listening and haven't subscribed to VandySports.com yet, you can get all the Joey Dwyer nuggets and scoops. It's $99 a year and $9.99 a month. It helps us tremendously. Subscribe to our Vandy Sports YouTube channel. Last-minute thoughts, pregame, postgame shows, all kinds of content. Go subscribe. Finally, if you're interested in sponsoring the show, email Chris Lee at chrislee70@gmail.com. For Joey Dwyer, I'm Billy Derrick. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you again soon with more episodes of the VandySports Podcast.